What if I told you there's a man who owns more land than the entire state of Delaware, and he's using it to bring species back from the edge of extinction? That man is Ted Turner, a media tycoon who quietly built one of the largest private land empires in the world, not for luxury, not for status, but for something far more ambitious. But how did he do it? And what's really happening across those millions of acres? Because this isn't just a story about land ownership. It's a story about restoring entire ecosystems, reviving lost wildlife, and proving that something once thought impossible can actually work. Let's rewind to 1989. Picture a windswept hillside in Montana, 113,000 acres of land so degraded it barely resembled a living ecosystem. The soil was stripped bare after decades of overgrazing and mismanagement. Native grasses were gone. The ground was compacted and lifeless. In some areas, it looked closer to a desert than a prairie. Most people saw it as a lost cause. But Turner didn't. He paid $22 million for it. And almost everyone thought he'd made a massive mistake. Advisors warned him. Local ranchers laughed. To them, this wasn't an investment, it was a financial disaster waiting to happen. But Turner wasn't looking at what the land was. He was thinking about what it could become. Standing there, he imagined something no one else could see. Vast herds of American bison moving across open grasslands. Not fenced, not confined, but free, just like they had been centuries earlier. At the time, that idea sounded unrealistic. Maybe even naive. Because by the late 1800s, bison had been pushed to near extinction. Once numbering around 60 million across North America, their population collapsed to fewer than 1,000 by 1890. Let that sink in. From tens of millions, to almost nothing. The few that remained were scattered in small protected herds or zoos. The idea of rebuilding large, functioning populations seemed almost impossible. But Turner wasn't interested in doing what was easy. Over the next 3 decades, he began acquiring more land, ranch after ranch, across multiple states. Not just buying property, but strategically assembling a network of ecosystems. In total, he invested over $2 billion. By the end of it, his land holdings stretched across more than 2.4 million acres. To put that into perspective, that's larger than some entire U.S. states. Bigger than several national parks combined. And across that land, something incredible began to take shape. Today, Turner's ranches support more than 51,000 bison, the largest private herd in the world. Roughly 10% of all bison in North America. But the real story isn't just about numbers. It's about what happened when those animals returned to the land. When the first bison were released, something unexpected happened. These animals had spent their lives in confined spaces. They had never experienced open prairie. When the gates opened, they hesitated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one stepped forward. It lifted its head, sensing the open air, the wind, the space. And then it ran. Moments later, the entire herd followed, charging across the landscape with a force that hadn't been seen there in over a century. For the people watching, it was more than just a release. It was a return. And then, slowly but surely, the land itself began to change. Unlike cattle, which often overgraze specific areas, bison move continuously. They graze in patterns that allow vegetation to recover. Their hooves break up hardened soil. Their behavior creates natural cycles that support plant growth. Within years, grass began to return. Within a decade, entire sections of land that had been barren turned green again. Satellite imagery even captured the transformation, areas that once appeared lifeless gradually becoming vibrant ecosystems. But it didn't stop with grass. As the habitat improved, wildlife began to return. Prairie dogs reappeared, rebuilding underground colonies. Birds that hadn't nested there in decades came back. Native plants and wildflowers started growing again. An ecosystem that had been pushed to collapse was rebuilding itself, from the ground up. And Turner didn't stop there. He expanded his conservation efforts to species that were even closer to extinction. One of the most difficult challenges involved the Mexican gray wolf. At one point, fewer than 50 remained in the entire world. Breeding them was extremely difficult. Disease, genetic limitations, and low population numbers made success unlikely. Many believed it wasn't worth the effort. But Turner continued. Years later, healthy wolf populations were successfully bred and reintroduced into the wild, helping bring the species back from the brink. Another project focused on Bison tortoises, ancient reptiles that have existed for thousands of years. With fewer than 2,500 left globally, their survival was uncertain. They grow slowly, take years to reproduce, and require very specific conditions to thrive. Despite those challenges, Turner's ranches now support one of the largest breeding populations in the world, ensuring their survival for future generations. But perhaps the most surprising part of this entire story is how it all became sustainable, not just environmentally, but financially. Because Turner understood something critical. If conservation depends only on funding, it won't last forever. It has to support itself. That's where Ted's Montana Grill comes in. A restaurant chain built around bison meat sourced directly from his ranches. At first, the idea seemed risky. Americans were used to beef. Bison wasn't exactly mainstream. But it worked. Bison meat turned out to be leaner, healthier, and more sustainable. And as demand grew, the restaurants expanded, creating a steady income stream that feeds directly back into conservation. It created a closed-loop system. The land supports the bison. The bison restore the land. The land produces resources. And those resources fund further conservation. It's a model where nature and business don't compete, they support each other. The impact goes beyond ecology. Turner's ranches generate over $100 million annually and provide jobs across rural communities, places that were once struggling economically. From ranch workers and scientists to local suppliers and tourism operators, entire regions have benefited. At the same time, these lands have become living laboratories. Researchers study wildlife behavior, climate patterns, and ecosystem restoration. The data collected is helping improve conservation strategies worldwide. And then something unexpected happened. As ecosystems recovered, predators began returning on their own. Mountain lions, bears, coyotes. Instead of removing them, Turner allowed them to stay, understanding that a complete ecosystem includes predators. And their presence actually strengthened the balance of wildlife populations. Even water systems improved. Through better land management, streams were restored, soil retained more moisture, and water quality increased, benefiting both wildlife and nearby communities. When you step back and look at everything together, the scale of what's been achieved is extraordinary. Millions of acres restored. Thousands of animals brought back. Entire ecosystems rebuilt. And all of it driven by a vision that most people initially dismissed. What started as a barren Montana hillside became one of the most successful private conservation efforts in history. It proves something powerful. That restoring nature isn't just possible. It's scalable. It's sustainable. And when done right, it can benefit both the planet and the people living on it.